set. We're going to go ahead and start. You guys all set? Okay, really good. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled May 24th meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the Village of Tinley Park. We'd like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If we could all stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Could we call the roll now, please?
Kaschek.
Here.
Vargas.
Here.
Sepasi.
Here.
Fritz. Bettenhausen. Gaskell.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, so we do seem to have a quorum. Are there any staff communications that we need to discuss, anything before we start here?
Nope.
No? Okay, really good. We have the minutes of the April 26th meeting online here, and I'm sure we have a chance to read them, so if we could just get a motion to approve the minutes of the April 26th meeting.
Motion. Second.
Okay. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. Okay, the motion's carried. And let's see, we have a public hearing tonight to grant a privacy fence setback variation. I'm not seeing well tonight, I'm not speaking well tonight, so good luck to all of us. So that's the first. May I have a motion to open the public hearing, please?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Okay. Now, let's see, is the applicant or representative here for this case for this
Yes.
evening? Good evening, sir. And your name, please?
Gregory Roberts.
Gregory Roberts. Good evening, sir. Thank you for being here.
Certainly, thank you for having me.
Have we, let's see, so if you're the only one, I'd like you to stand. We're going to swear you in.
Sure.
Do you solemnly swear that any testimony you give in this hearing will be the total truth and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you very much. Okay, staff has provided me with confirmation that we did have public notices, and we did have a sign. I drove by your house, I saw the sign in front. So the public has been duly notified of everything. So, Dan, why don't you do the staff presentations?
Sure.
I don't see Kimberly running in, so.
So this is a variation request to allow a 5-foot tall privacy fence to encroach 10 feet into the secondary front yard. I did talk to the petitioner. His application says 12 to 15. The plans showed 10. He did confirm 10 is going to be what he's asking for today. So all the motions and everything will be 10 feet. So the existing site is in Fairmont Village subdivision. It's pretty large open lots. There's not a lot of fences out there. There are quite a few since that back up to 80th Avenue and 175th. The kind of interior of it are pretty large and open lots. The existing site now does not have a fence, and the corner lot that's immediately adjacent to this property also does not currently have a fence. The subject lot's a 10,857 square foot property, so it's bigger than the 10,000 minimum. And what most of the lots in the subdivision are around 10,000, so that has a little bit extra square footage on it, which we do now kind of in new corner lots, because you lose some space to be able to expand on your property with the second front yard. So corner lots now in these newer subdivisions kind of have bigger wider corner lots. So there's few corner lots. Sorry, this is what the petitioner is requesting. So he wants to go out 10 feet into the secondary front yard with a 5-foot privacy fence. At that location, he could get administrative approval for a 4-foot and open design fence at that location. So if he wanted the privacy fence, he could also push that back to the house to the building line, and you could have up to a 6-foot privacy fence. so we gave the petitioner those options. I think he can maybe speak to it a little bit more, but he wanted some more privacy, and he wanted to expand his backyard, fenced-in backyard space as much as possible. This is an image of the existing front of the house, and then coming off on the right side there would be where the fence would kind of stick out, and where you would see the fence going further out than the house does. Here is the side yard of where he's trying to fence in. There's currently electrical boxes, and then kind of in the back corner of the property, patio, and then a play set that's on the side yard as well. So kind of right where the fence would be running. Here's the existing neighborhood. We did do a little bit of research out there just to see what the corner houses kind of in this area also have. Not that throughout the community or throughout Tinley Park, we've seen non-conforming fences all over the place, and they would have to come into conformance with the code, trying to correct kind of some of the past mistakes and kind of some of the visual issues. This subdivision actually doesn't have very many corner fences at all. So out of the kind of the 14 nearest lots that we were able to take out of this, only 2 of them had corner fences. One's a 4-foot open design fence that has a hedgerow in front of it that kind of gives it that privacy, and that is permitted. And that comes only 10 feet out. So there's that one that actually meets the administrative approval now. At number 14 on your screen is a corner lot that received a variation in 1999 to be able to do it's a 5 or a 6 foot, I think it was somewhere in between there, open design fence that basically the justification for that lot was that it's a through lot. It doesn't really back up to any other properties. The frontage of that lot is not a frontage of another home right next to it or down the street. So having kind of two busy roads there is why they approved that one. It was also back when the code was a little different as well, so prior to our current amendments. That happened late last year or early this year. So here's a couple pictures of that property that received the variation. So just showing the current fence is open design. It's also a unique, again, a through lot with three roads on it. So the petitioner's current proposal, again, could be, or is a 5-foot solid fence. Here's the administrative approval section where you could have a 4-foot open design fence that could be approved. So I guess we did want to point out that the neighboring property to this on the back side that directly abuts this also does not have a fence. So we do kind of see if this one's approved, that his neighbor's going to come in at some point. But kind of whatever you approve here kind of sets the tone for this whole neighborhood in terms of corner fences, and especially with his neighbor there who's going to want to match the fence line and probably match the style. So we don't see any immediate safety concerns with the fence in terms of visibility at the corner, but aesthetically this is kind of gonna set the tone out there. Obviously not going to read this off, but I did in the packets. We updated a little bit of the history of the fence regulations. And I think you guys had asked on the last fence variation, just asked us, did we know how many lots were non-conforming? Did we figure that out when we did the code? And the answer is no, they didn't really look at every lot out there. They kind of knew that was going to happen. You're going to have to force people to come into conformance. The good news is, for the most part, people that have an existing 6-foot fence usually can keep it where it's at It just has to go down to 4-foot and open design then, just to be more appealing, look good on the streetscape, not block visibility. So there's plenty of them out there, especially in the older neighborhoods that are non-conforming. So that was kind of known, but I don't think we had a total number. The point was to change the code and kind of fix those issues and make it really, when we really dove into it, it was to make the code a lot more clear, because there was the separate administrative approval section that wasn't very clear about what were the requirements to get an administrative approval or an administrative variation. So the new code also kind of cleared that up, because we were approving fences depending on who the person was reviewing it, and could have looked at stuff a different way. So this kind of cleared that up. Do you guys usually wait to go through the standards then until after? Sorry, do the standards now? Okay, so our staff kind of written standards here. From what we saw was that the subject parcel, so the first standard is the property in question cannot yield a reasonable return if permitted to be used only under the conditions allowed by the regulations in the district in which it is located. So our view of this was that under the current zoning district, the applicant is allowed to encroach into the secondary front yard by 10 feet with a 4-foot tall fence that's open style design. If you really wanted more privacy, he could also push the fence back. In either scenario, he can have a fence at that location. It won't limit their ability to yield a reasonable return on the property. The second one is the plight of the owner is due to unique circumstances. So the subject property is not really unique. It's a corner lot that exceeds the ordinance allowed lot size, or the minimum lot size, and was platted with additional lot width to kind of accommodate the corner front yard setback requirements and give them the normal size backyard space. All corner property, again, this is a code that directly applies to corner properties, so it's not like we're applying standards for some other type of a parcel. The variation, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. That's the third standard. So the variation, if granted, would alter the current character of the locality. The majority of the corner lot properties in the neighborhood do not have fencing or fencing that meet the current setback code requirements. The existing lot is similar to other corner lots in the neighborhood and throughout the village, and parcels that are immediately adjacent to it. So granting this variation would establish precedence that could result in additional variation requests throughout this subdivision as well as elsewhere in the village. There's also not an existing fence at that property at this time that they're replacing. So there's the other considerations that you guys are usually used to, so I won't go through all those. But I guess I'll point out the one, which is the hardship has not been created by the owner of the property or by any previous owners. Again, we can't really call out a hardship here because there's no fence. He can have a fence. It's just, I guess, not convenient. So I think that is it for our staff report.
Okay. Any of you folks have any questions for Dan before we move to the petition?
There's a discrepancy in your photos. One of the aerial shot shows no gym set, and the street level shot shows a gym set. Is there an existing gym set there now?
Yes, there's an existing, so those photos are the most recent. I assume it looked pretty new, so it was probably put in after that aerial was taken. But the photos are current from like a week ago.
Okay, before we ask Mr. Roberts to come forward, sir, you just walked in, welcome. Were you planning to speak during this hearing tonight?
I would like the opportunity.
Okay, then I'd like you to stand, please. We'll get you sworn in.
Let's see. I'll put the glasses back on to do this.
All right, sir. Do
I
you
apologize
solemnly
for
swear or affirm that the evidence that you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Roberts, you are the petitioner, so maybe you'd like to speak now?
Sure. Do I go to the podium? Or do I-
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay, great. So thank you for seeing me tonight. I greatly appreciate it. And Dan, thank you so much for our communication. You've been very helpful. So I wanted to just kind of point out a couple of things where I may have a different interpretation of the findings, if we could, and then I want to kind of focus on what I consider to be the main points of the findings from the board. So one of the things that Dan said in his presentation there was that our particular plat was actually allotted more area for extra backyard space, which is fantastic. It's a wonderful attribute of having a corner lot, and it's that yard space that we're trying to take advantage of. Right, so I do have a family with children and an animal that we would like to keep in the yard and get as much of our yard as we can that's usable, that we're allowed to within ordinance and within regulations from the city. So that's definitely a consideration for us. So when reading through the findings, I found that there were really two main points that the board took into consideration, and they focused on the fact that few, if any, of the corner lots have fences, and that is true. I would consider that to be the obligation or the right of the homeowner to decide whether or not to put in a fence. There's no regulation that says you have to. If you have a fence in Tinley Park or a corner lot in Tinley Park, that you would be required to have a fence. So, in my opinion, I think that the fact that few corner lots have fences is not really relevant to my petition for a fence, because it's up to the individual owner of the property. The other main point was around aesthetics. So I completely understand and I completely agree with the need for aesthetics and to try to keep a beautiful city. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that we were voted one of the top places in the nation to raise a family, right? So. My question or concern over the interpretation of that aesthetic discussion from the board is that the options that are presented to us would allow me to put a 6-foot fence straight off the back of the house, or to come out 10 feet and put a 4-foot fence, neither of which will match up to the height of my neighbor's fence, who happens to be sitting here in the audience. So. If we were to put in a fence that is shorter or taller to his, my argument would be that the aesthetics would be altered as well, in the negative, in my opinion. The other point regarding the lot that we have is I don't think that we have a true corner lot in that we have a curve. So there is no cross traffic around our lot at all. It's obviously a normal residential street, so traffic flows in one lane and the other lane. There is no stop sign at our corner. There is no abutting street at all. So, their traffic concerns, I think, are minimal, again, in my personal opinion. And the other point that I would like to make is regarding the property itself. The tree that's actually in the front yard sticks out farther than the 10 feet of the fence, and in full bloom of summer, if obstruction of the streetscape or street for drivers is a concern, I don't feel that the fence presents any more of a current situation to that than the tree does. So the last thing that I would like to say is regarding the request. Yes, we've requested a privacy fence. I am not beholden to a privacy fence. I'm perfectly willing to put in a 50% see-through, open to air, as at the 5-foot level. Instead of the 4. So I am comfortable asking for the 10-foot allowance that's there. I'm comfortable asking for the 50% allowance or requirement for the construction of the fence. The point of contention for me personally is the height is the 4 foot versus 5. Reason for that is, again, I have 3 small children, so I want to keep bad people out of my yard as much as possible. I also have an animal that I have a dog, and I don't feel that a 4-foot fence would be able to contain him while giving us the same benefit of enjoying the space that we have purchased in the village of Tinley Park. So those are the points that I would like to make, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there just one questions?
He answered the questions, and I had a question of whether you had any children or any animals. He nailed both of them.
Great.
There you go.
And I do like the fact that you're willing to do the open, 50% open, as opposed to the privacy fence, so
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm sorry, am I loud?
No, you go ahead.
In retrospect, I look at this as there's really three conditions, right, for this variance that we're requesting: the 10 feet out, the 4 foot, and the 50% see-through. 2 out of the 3 are not an issue for us at all. The height is more than anything. Again, the animal, the dog that we have, is in my opinion, a 4-foot fence would not contain him. I think that he would be able to get over it, as my neighbor hopefully will be able to attest to. And being in our location, we are very close to 2 divided 4-lane highways, 171st and 80th Avenue. So if the animal is out of the yard, he's a public nuisance or menace, potentially cause an accident or potentially, you know, harm someone, which I don't think he ever would. But if cornered, there's always that possibility because he is an animal. So that's one of our concerns and one of the reasons why we're looking at it.
Okay, if you want to step aside for just a moment.
Certainly.
I'd like to have your neighbor come up and
Sure.
tell us what he wants to tell us. Sir, can you give us your name first, please?
Could you sign in? if you
Of
don't
course I
mind?
can. My name is Matthew Cruikshank. I actually grew up in Tinley Park at about 88th Street and moved away for a couple years, and I'm back in Tinley, and I live right next door to Mr. Roberts. We have 2 kids that are really similar in age. His twins are the same age as my daughter. So my son and his 2 children, and then his older daughter play together all the time. They go back and forth between yards, and I have a fence around my yard, and Greg doesn't yet. There's a lot of times that we play in my yard because of the surrounding area. You know, 171st Street and 80th Avenue are super busy streets. You know, it's the kind of scary streets, you know, if you've got little kids. You know, I've got a 2-year-old, you know, that can, or I'm sorry, a 3-year-old, I'm gonna get in trouble. But, you know, where if you get out, it's not a pretty day. Greg's got a big dog too. You know, he's got a, you know, pretty decent, you know, hip size for me, and I'm a tall guy size dog. So height of the fence is also important. I wasn't here for the entire part of the meeting, so I don't know the points we talked about. I know that Greg was talking a little bit about aesthetics, and I have some strong opinions on aesthetics, and sometimes coherency is a great design philosophy. Or, you know, things that are put together with a theory rather than just hodgepodge tend to look better, even if it's not your favorite color or your favorite shade. Greg was going to match the fence that I put around my home a couple years ago, and my fence is 5 feet high, so if it was, you know, that area, it would be a very nice continuance of what already exists there. As far as how far he extends onto the easement, I feel like design has a lot to do with proportions. You know, there's a reason why things like the golden ratio and phi have been so popular in art and design throughout the years. And if you have a fence come right off the side of your house, so he's able to have a fence that can contain his dog, it's going to look choppy and it's going to look awkward. You know, that's one of the main reasons why fences are always offset from the home, a small distance. One of the other arguments that I don't think Greg had made is if the fence goes very close to his home, he's not really going to have any type of width to his backyard. I don't know if you have plot surveys, but if you look at the way that 120 or 170/25 is laid out to where it meets his home, I have probably 7/8 of that property enclosed by the fence. There's a probably, what would you say, 36 inches or so between the side of his house and where my fence is. So if he has a fence very close to the side, you know, you're going to feel like you can't stretch your arms out in the backyard. It's going to be like there's no large lawn. And that goes back to proportions too. You know, you want to try to have things be more, you know, squared if possible than like super rectangle. It's not like Burbank where we've got, you know, really narrow lawns. My opinion of the neighborhoods, it's a great place to live, and I don't feel like any size fence extruding to any point of, you know, space in the easement would, or in the easement on the side of the property would in any way infringe on aesthetics.
Anybody have any questions? at this point.
Just for the point of clarification, the
Yes.
fence shown on the aerial photo to the north of the property in question is your fence?
That's correct, yeah.
And it's 5 foot in height?
Yeah, it's 5 foot in height. It varies in height because if you stand on the side and look at my fence, the top of the fence is level, and then the bottom of the fence will follow the grade. You know, so it doesn't stair step like you'll see some fences stair step as the grade changes. You know, the grade just changes with the ground.
Okay, Dan, this question might be more for you, but maybe the two guys can answer too.
Sure.
You mentioned that there's a ComEd junction box on the property.
Yes, it's on the
Okay.
northeast.
Northeast corner, is that right? I think I'm seeing a little tiny piece of it here. What are we gonna do about that?
So the plan is to keep that enclosed in the yard and to have an access gate in the back of on the back side of the house between our house and the neighbors directly to our east. The children in that house play with my children constantly as well. So we would have a gate and there would be access there, you know, for any utility company that needed to come.
Which is the only
Does that cover our
requirement,
easement?
as long as they have an open gate, they can't lock all their gates, so no one can get in the
Okay,
property.
it's a junction box.
So as long as
Obviously,
they have a
back
way to
gates up in
access
there or
it.
anything, but,
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, it would be a concern getting them in, so.
Once every 15 years, maybe you got to do that.
Actually, at my house, they did it once every 2 years.
It's more common than you think when you have those.
Our neighborhood, Jan.
Yeah.
We had some serious power problems.
When I lived in Crestwood, it was like that. It was every 9 months or something they were tearing up the ground, and you know, yeah, we didn't have power.
Okay, does anybody
Thank
else
you.
have any questions for any of these parties?
I was gonna make just a couple, I guess,
Sure. Go right
follow-up
ahead.
points that I had remembered. So they can step the fence. I'm not countering exactly what you're saying, but they can't step
Oh,
the
that's okay.
fence if they want to. Just so you guys know, it can be 4 foot open design, and then it can go up to 6 feet once it gets out of the secondary front yard. So they don't have to run a 4 foot fence all the way around. There is still some aesthetic parts to how you make that work. Do you kind of glide it up? Is it harsh? So it doesn't always look the best, but you
And
can
want to try
kind
to
of
make it look like you intended to do that. You know, if you have the back yard's fence slope at 2 feet, over 30 feet, it's going to look like you didn't have the level right. It's not going to look like you intended to have it slope down, where it would if you were looking at like a 10 feet span and you were going to narrow down those 2 feet. You know, if you start going really close to level but pitching it just slightly, it starts to look like error, not intention.
Yeah, I'm just letting them
Yeah.
know that
So
that
at
can
your
happen.
highest
It doesn't
point,
require
5 feet is where we're at.
Yeah,
At highest point from ground level, I mean, it's 5 feet.
yeah. Mhm.
So up at the house, it would be 4 feet, maybe 4.5?
I'm sorry?
Up near the house, it would be maybe 4.5 feet? Is that what we're saying?
You know, I'd have to pull a tape measure out, but yeah,
Yeah, I'm just-
I
I'm
would
just
imagine
saying-
the whole thing probably, you know, the back pitch, it's the pitch, the grade of my backyard is more aggressive towards the northwest corner, or the northeast corner of my lot.
Well, sure.
And it's much more sloped, where I think they've had to repair the sewer, one of my neighbors had told me, before I had moved in. So it's relatively flat around that area over there. I would say the grade is probably a foot, maybe a foot and a half down.
Okay, so that puts me where I say, 4 foot to 5 foot.
Yeah.
And
I'm
another
sorry,
question,
it's long-winded.
where does the actual end of the side front yard, or the secondary front yard start and end?
basically where that house line is. So it's
So the blue line is the intent. Everything
well,
south
so
of that blue
I guess
line
in
is-
this one it's a little bit. So there's like a required side yard, and then there's your side yard. So their home matches the required side yard, so they're the same in this situation. Where if you actually had that, if the home was smaller or something, you could actually have the fence come out a little bit. But since the current side yard matches the required minimum, it's the same point. So.
If I may, if you're asking how far from the side of my house to the sidewalk,
No,
okay.
he was saying something about the 4 to 5 foot fence. You know, where it reaches 5 foot fence, it's past the secondary front yard.
Oh,
And that was my question, where does the secondary front yard end?
That blue line, where you would be able to have the 6 foot fence,
Right.
is
So the back-
That's
the
where
back
the
of
sec,
property.
that's the
Requesting the red line.
the
Really
line.
long skinny rectangle.
So, yeah, so he's requesting the red line, which would have to be 5 foot, no, 5 foot high, no more than, or 4 foot high, rather.
4 foot high and open, and then once he got to the blue line, he could step it back up to 6 foot privacy.
Oh, then going north, okay.
Yeah. So just
gotcha.
that red portion is the part that
I
needs to be
understand.
4 foot and open.
And again, speaking to that point, if I may, so aesthetically, I wouldn't think that would look very attractive at all. So I think uniformity would look much better.
We're probably
Sure.
misunderestimating the size of Rocky. What would you say? Rocky's a great dog. I think he's probably 90 pounds. Does that sound about right? Yeah, he's about 90 pounds. And his head comes up to me, up to my hip or so. He's a very friendly dog. I forget what type of breed he is, but he's not in any way, shape, or form a dangerous dog. But he's very playful as a puppy. So we're trying to not build a play set for him. Something that can, restrict his movement. So, the unfortunate rock in the hard place is, do you build a fence that can contain the dog? Or do you build the fence that the city requires you to? Because if you build the fence to contain the dog, if you look at the way that those yards are shaped, he's literally got from the boundaries of his home to the back, what's enclosed there. Which is going to seem really...
Isn't a small area.
It is a small area.
No, it isn't.
No, it's not. We rough estimated it to be 800 to 900 square feet, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
I meant the small area of what we're, the difference of what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah,
Between,
that-
like, if you set it back and forth is what I meant by the small area.
The utility box is about 15 feet from your northern fence.
The utility box is like right on the west side of like the center of the easement.
I'd say it's about 10 to 12 feet, yeah.
Yeah, if you look at where my fence makes a corner by where the sewer grate is right there and then continues northbound. My fence is right on the center of the easement. So if it's a 10-foot easement, those utility boxes need to be a foot into the easement, something like that. They're not very far.
I have one last question. Sure. Were you still planning to use the same style fencing, where the fence is going to be mirror images of each other, yours and his?
That would be the intent. To be quite honest, Matt, we were planning on building it ourselves, and if I can match it to his fence, and that's if that's the that would be the easiest point of return, I believe, because you've got experience building that type of fence. And so
It's
that was
a
the
very
intent.
nice cedar fence.
Yes.
It's a little bit more closed than 50%. It's probably 60. There's I believe there's 2 1/4 inches between a 4-foot plank, which would be 3.5 foot. So there's like 2.5 inches and then like a 3-inch. Like 3.5 inch plank. It's probably 3 3/8 or something like that. So it's a little bit more closed than 50%, but we can accommodate things if that's the requirement. It would be the most cohesive if we went to like a 60% coverage, which you can't really. When you drive past my fence, it's not a privacy fence in the least bit.
Your fence was very nice when I drove past.
Well, thank you.
I did like it. It was
Yeah.
very-
It's not in the least bit what I consider a privacy fence.
Okay, are there any other questions for either Dan or the gentleman?
Well, I'll note too, I think Mr. Roberts said he was planning on putting in a pool, so just to reference that, it won't actually extend his side yard, so he won't be able to put a pool in this area, even though it'll look like more backyard space. He won't be able to put a pool or a shed or a deck in that 10 feet still, unless he wanted to come back for another variation for that. So
You wouldn't want to anyway. You'd want to have room around
if
it.
this is approved to go out there, just note that. And then the hardship part of it is I struggle because I love kids and dogs, but most of the hardship's typically with the property. So we get that that's why this typically comes forward. But I would just point out that hardship's typically related to the physical property. And saying I can't meet the code. So I'm not against dogs, puppies, or children. Just
You
want
want
to
a
state
cat?
that. So that's it. And then if you guys do, once you deliberate, you can my motion's drafted to what Mr. Roberts has
So Rocky
originally
doesn't-
requested, so you could change that to say open style if you guys want to, or 4 foot, or whatever you guys decide.
So Rocky doesn't have an affinity to fingers, so if you have a 60 or 60% coverage, no kid's gonna stick his hand in there and lose a finger?
No,
Okay.
no, nothing like
My
that.
dog has a propensity to try and lick everybody who walks by. I mean, he's a great dog, but, you know, he is an animal, so I mean, if somebody were to stick their hand in my fence, I can't say that he wouldn't bite, but I can't.
I have the exact opposite dogs as him. I've got 2 little Shiba Inus, which are 25 pounds. Well, they should be 25 pounds. They're probably closer to 30. And they're little guys, and they can't get through my fence or anything like that. My neighbor behind me has an aluminum, like makeshift wrought iron fence, and they can kind of get their snout underneath that. There wouldn't be any way that Rocky would get his head through that or anything like that. His nose is probably bigger than.
I'm a lab owner, so I know where you're coming from.
Yeah, he's a lab hound mix, so he's a coon hound lab mix, so
He's a knucklehead.
he is absolutely, but he's my knucklehead, so.
Okay.
I love labs.
Any other questions or comments before we close the hearing?
I'd like to make one if I could.
Absolutely.
So just in conversations with the immediate neighbors, I have actually signatures from them that say that they don't have any objections to the proposed fence that we're talking about putting in. If you guys would like that documentation, I'm happy to provide it. If it helps in any way, you know, I can. If not, then I can hold on to it.
I mean, we can always take a copy or something, put it in the file just for future reference.
This has been the topic of the sewing circles around the
Yeah.
neighborhood lately, and I promise you, I'm not in like cahoots with Mr. Roberts here or anything like that. But everybody I've heard from is apathetic to the distance and the height of the fence.
Well, all right then, if there's no other questions or discussions, could I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All those in favor of closing, signify so by saying aye.
First
Aye.
public hearing.
Any opposed? Okay. Let's go ahead and see if we're gonna have a motion to approve a privacy setback variation as presented. Is anybody interested in making that motion?
So you can take a seat.
As it stands now,
Well, we can make it with conditions. We can alter the motion.
I would like to alter the condition, or alter the motion, to get rid of the privacy fence and to put in at least a 50%. If we were going to make the motion regardless.
Now, Barb, I'm a little backwards on this. Do we go ahead and read the motion as is and then make the alteration?
You can make the motion with the conditions. It says with the following conditions.
Okay,
Well,
so-
no, I guess you'd want to actually make the correct motion. You don't want to make it say a
Well,
motion
any
with
changes
privacy.
that are within the wording of the motion, you can change it as you go,
Yeah.
and then if there's any conditions, you can add those
So,
at the end.
so where it says privacy fence, I would say open design fence, where it says privacy fence, when you make the motion.
So open design conclude the 50%?
Yeah, minimal.
Yes, but it's defined as 50% open. so.
Okay. But other than that, if we wanted to approve the 5-foot and the 10-foot bump out, that's all in the motion already?
Correct. Yeah, the 5 foot tall and then the 10 feet's in there, so if you're changing that, it would just be changing it to say open style, 5 foot open style fence.
Okay, does anybody want to take a stab at that?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the village board grant the following variation to the petitioner Jennifer and Gregory Roberts. A 1-foot height variation from section 3J3A1 fence regulations of the zoning ordinance to permit a 5-foot tall privacy fence with additional 6-inch posts to extend up to 10 feet into the required secondary front yard of 17031 Woodstock Drive in the R3 Single Family Residential Zoning District, consistent with the list of submitted plans as attached herein, and adopt findings of fact as proposed by village staff, and as may be amended by the Zoning Board of Appeals at this meeting with the following conditions. The fence will be a minimum of 50% privacy.
So you could change it in the wording up here at the time, within the paragraph, right?
So you'd like to change it to permit a 5-foot tall, open concept or open design fence, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Would you like to do that, Bob?
Okay, we'll do that.
50% with 50%.
Yeah. Okay, it's been moved. Does anybody want a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Jennifer Vargas. Discussion.
I just want to say I'm sympathetic to the kids and the dog, but to be honest with you, when we're doing something like this, we can't take that into consideration because we're talking about the property.
Mhm.
So when we're making our decisions, this has to be solely on the property itself and not on the kids, the dog, because let's face it, the kids grow up, the dog moves on, and so that's not something that we look at when we're looking at the zoning part of it.
Sure.
So I just want you to know that even though we are sympathetic to that, that's something we can't take into consideration at this time. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Any other comments from board members?
Well, I would like to echo Dan's comment earlier, and actually at the beginning of this thing about setting a precedent. You know, we start doing this for this particular property, that's just gonna leave it wide open for every corner lot in that neighborhood and any corner lot in Tinley Park. To come to this, next thing you know, it'll be 6-foot fences out 10 feet. Or then it'll go to the 12 and 15 feet. And then it'll be privacy. And then, you know, it's just opening a can of worms that they change the ordinance to eliminate.
I agree with you in theory, but I think a 10-foot bump out, a man's gonna put a shed in his yard, he's gonna put a pool
Well,
in his
then
yard.
why didn't they make the ordinance a 10-foot bump out? Why didn't they just leave it that way and instead of changing it?
Well, because I think there's just a tremendous difference in the yard designs and the yard sizes. What they've done is they've created a template for us to work from.
I get that.
I mean, you know, almost every situation is a unique situation. 3 weeks ago or
Well-
4 weeks ago, we had a situation where they wanted a full privacy 6-foot fence. If you looked at the back of the yard where the power lines and stuff were, that was a true no-brainer.
Mhm.
Because you wanted them protected kid-wise, wind-wise, the power lines and everything wise. So this is another situation where this is a beautiful subdivision with a lot of open spaces and a lot of large yards or a lot of space where now these people want to be able to utilize. I noticed you have a pool in your yard, okay, but you yourself said you had a significantly bigger usable lot space because of the position of your home. So I'm looking at the position of this house, and he is kind of set back from a curved road. The yard, I know because I have a small yard, you see my yard, I think. I have a small yard, and we had a pool for a while. So I can sympathize with the idea that that extra 10 feet really does make a difference in his utilization of the property for his own benefit. So
But it's for a benefit, it's not for a hardship or anything. It's not something he has to do.
No, that's quite true.
If he wants to go 5 foot high, let him go from the house line back.
But I would like to interject there about the aesthetics of that. I do agree that coming right off the side of the house or from the backyard, aesthetically, in that neighborhood, I don't know necessarily if that would be the correct thing to do. That's my opinion, but I think having an open fence as opposed to a privacy fence would be more aesthetically pleasing for that area and the neighborhood.
And that's allowed 10 foot out,
And also,
but only 4 foot. So basically we're talking a variance of just that foot,
1 foot.
not actually the fence.
Correct. Yeah, as of right now, you're at, well, and that's from the administrative approval section. So there are other conditions that we have to look at to approve that, like visibility and stuff. All those are covered here. So really what he's asking for is, yeah, just that 1
foot.
1 foot higher.
1 foot and 10 foot out.
And for the precedent thing, I love and hate it, that word, because
But it's true.
every single one of these is, you got to look at it on its own merit. At the same point, if you approve them, I mean, you look at the stuff where everyone's going to point to the fence next to them. That's that way. And it gets really hard for us as staff and for you guys to start saying no. in even slightly comparable situations. So it does kind of snowball.
Sure.
I feel like we're getting into the argument on like the slippery slope fallacies, where if we allow a large fence, then we're gonna have to allow people to put posters on the fence, and then because we have posters on the fence, we're gonna have to be able to have a solid fence and paint it, and then they're gonna put billboards on it, and then there's gonna be a highway right next
No,
to it.
we're just talking fences,
You know,
sir.
I understand, but like, just because things are possibilities doesn't mean they're going to be actual. You know, part of the controls that we have in zoning and in property plans is this type of a situation. And if we're trying to eliminate a certain fence design, I don't feel like this 1 foot variation on a 10-foot step out from the house would necessarily set this slippery slope in motion that would lead to dogs and cats living together in mass hysteria. I think this is a very small difference that, if it's allowed to sit outside of the home, will allow him to have a much larger and more valuable yard. I feel like if you have to build this fence off the side of the home, it's going to be detrimental to his property value, because it's going to severely limit the size of the apparent size of the lot when you're in it, with the position of my fence and then the position of this fence. This is a very small change that no one probably will notice. And it's right tucked in on a curved part of the street between 2 super busy streets. This is not in the center of a neighborhood. This is tucked away in the corner by the busy streets. You know, this is not a high traffic area where there's lots of cars driving by here all the time that's going to be getting a lot of attention or anything like that, but it is very adjacent to very large streets. I feel like this minor fluctuation to the fencing ordinance does not set any type of poisonous precedent that can't be overcome.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that because a precedent, again, you guys can look at each case individually on its own merits with its own setup. I'm just saying from an enforcement standpoint and from a request standpoint, I mean, we've been enforcing this code for months now, so we're making people comply with it. And I think, and then when people come forward, it's the first thing is look at all these fences. We knew there was going to be some that didn't meet it, but now allowing people to not meet it from the start sets that whole different, how do you say the next person has to meet it when you've allowed
That's my
others?
point.
So
Well, I think-
you can look at it
Where is it gonna
individually,
end?
but that's great in theory, but people are still going to point to other fences.
Exactly.
If I could, so one of the things that we've heard here is hardship and being able to demonstrate hardship. So what I don't feel that the board is taking into account is lifestyle hardship as well. So yes, my property doesn't have a physical hardship that would not allow me to conform to the code. However, there is something to be said for a lifestyle hardship in that a 4-foot fence. If I went that route, in all likelihood, I would continue to have a tie-up for my dog. Therefore, I'm not getting to utilize the full space of which I own and love and manicure and take care of. There's also the concern for my wife being able to safely let the kids play outside without having to worry about somebody entering the yard. I think a 5-foot fence makes it much more difficult for somebody to enter a yard than a 4-foot fence. There are people who can get over a 4-foot fence with minimal effort. I think a 5-foot fence makes it more difficult to do. So while I can't demonstrate a property hardship, I would like to, at least the consideration for the types of lifestyle hardships that a 4-foot fence would present.
If we're just talking about home appeal and value as well, if you're looking at 2 identical homes and you walk into one home, if you're prospective buyer, and you walk into one home and there's a fence within 2 feet of the side of your house on one end, and then the fence comes directly off the home on the other end, and the next house that you look at has this extra 10 feet within the fence. It's not rocket science to know which one is more appealing to you because of the proportions and how things are set back. You know, things look well and things look eloquent when they're in proportions, when you have, you know, size changes and particular ratios, and when you have the backyard come as a direct extension off of the structure, that doesn't give you the pleasant change in shape. You know, the backyard should be slightly larger than the structure. That's how we're accustomed to seeing homes. Okay. And if you're a prospective buyer to a property and you walk in there and there's this fence that comes right off the side of the home, and on the other side of the fence you've got 2 or 3 feet between it, you're going to feel crammed and it's not going to seem correct.
Okay, let me interrupt here. It really is up to us right now to call the question.
I'm sorry.
That's okay,
Yeah,
that's
I'm
all right.
sorry.
So if you could. Call the roll.
Okay. Paschek,
Yes?
Vargas,
Yes.
Sepisi,
Yes.
Gaskell.
No.
Okay, at this point, your variance has been recommended by this board. Your next step is going to be to attend the village board meetings, and I'm not sure, what would the date of their, do we know?
I have it.
Do you have it? You attend.
It'll
that
be on
meeting.
June 5th.
June 5th?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you'd be at the June 5th village board meeting, and they will open your case, or they will read your request for the variation for the first time, and you would have opportunity to speak then, correct? You'd have an opportunity to speak then to address, but for now, you have passed the first hurdle. We can send you on to them and see. It's not a guarantee that it's going to pass, but certainly our recommendation will be taken into account. And one last thing, as far as the dog goes, put the 5-foot fence up and then get the electronic fence for right inside the fence. And put the little collar on. They work wonders. And they're not evil or cruel or anything. Okay?
I appreciate that, thank you.
So that takes care of that portion, and we're all set. Our motion is carried. So does anybody have anything for the good of the order? Crickets.
Yeah, well, I'll start with the boring stuff first. So I know we've been bringing up the software stuff, so we did finally select a contractor. So
Yeah,
they're
let me
moving.
interrupt for a second.
Sure.
You guys are welcome to stay, but you don't have to stay.
Oh.
Unless you want to hear about software.
I really like software.
in Oak Park playbooks.
Thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, good luck.
Have a nice one.
So they are moving
Sorry.
forward with that. So I know Kimberly, Paula, they're all really excited. The building department, sounds like it should be really good and kind of connect everything together. Be a better way to actually keep our records. There's the legacy code updates, which Paula's working on now. That I think she's got a little more free time with us here, so she's finally going full go on those. The Oak Park playbook was approved, correct? So that has a bunch of different grants that the downtown and Oak Park businesses can use to upgrade facades, meet codes, upgrade signage. So it covers all of that, and hopefully that'll get some use early on. I think there's already some interest in using some of those. We do have a couple of applications in for South Street, downtown South Street developments we're reviewing right now. There's some missing items on a couple of them, but they're close to being able to get a full staff review, and those may be going forward at some point here. So that's about it for what's going on here. We did want to ask you guys about time change again. I know this came up not too long ago, but I believe part of the issue was the chairperson at the time didn't want to change it, so we thought we'd ask again and try and get some feedback. You don't have to make a decision right now, and maybe we'll send an email out to the couple board members.
What are you looking for?
Yeah.
So we'd like to make it 7 instead of 7:30, if that works for everyone's schedules.
That, I agree with that.
The key, for us, continuity between Plan Commission and ZBA, and gets you guys, gets everyone out of here a little earlier, so.
I think it's 4 votes for
And
you, right?
we're open to even earlier than that, but we know that
I don't know if anybody
people have
wants-
work and
Yeah,
to get here.
because
so.
some of our a couple board members that aren't here, and then if we decide to change that, we'll maybe let you know at the next meeting. The next meeting in June does have an application in, so there will be. What's the date of that?
June 14th.
Okay. Now, we discussed this last month, June 14th. I will be, by the time you start the meeting, I'll be on a plane,
Okay.
so I will not be here.
Okay.
One other item for those of us who are directionally challenged, can you put a little north flag on some of these
Sure.
pictures?
Sure. Yeah, definitely on the maps and the aerials.
Right.
Yeah.
You can generally
It's a good-
figure it out, but it'd
good-
be a lot easier.
Yeah, it's a good point. Most maps should have a north arrow on them. I think that's in the
call
the
it
give in the basics.
It's a
So
north
yeah.
flag.
All right, does anybody else have anything else of any kind? Then I would like to entertain a motion to close the meeting.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all opposed. Don't sign. Good night.